Welcome to the frozen nightmare of Alaska. Imagine a land where the cold isn't just a temperature, but a living, breathing predator, where abandoned villages whisper your name, haunted mines hide secrets no one should uncover, and the sea itself waits to devour anyone foolish enough to wander too close. This isn't just a story. It's a descent into the relentless Arctic darkness, where shadows watch, whispers haunt, and the disappearing light may be the last thing you ever see. Are you brave enough to follow the frozen footprints of the lost? To survive the killer cold, the howls in the night, and the sea that eats? Hit that subscribe button now and join us as we uncover the terrifying secrets hidden beneath Alaska's icy grip. Don't blink. You might miss the shadows moving in the dark. Utqiagvik, Alaska, once known as Barrow, it sits on the edge of the world, north of the Arctic Circle, where winter is not simply cold but eternal. In late November, the sun sets on the horizon and does not rise again until the end of January. For more than 60 days, the land is consumed by night. To outsiders, it sounds almost romantic, an endless twilight beneath the northern lights, a mysterious gift of nature. But to those who live here, it is something else entirely. The darkness changes you. At first, life goes on as usual. People use artificial lamps, children bundle up in parkas to go to school, and stores remain open in the gloom. But as the weeks stretch on, time becomes meaningless. There is no morning, no evening, no rhythm to guide the mind. Clocks tick, but the body forgets when to sleep, when to wake, when to eat. Locals call it the long night, and they whisper of the things it brings. For generations, the Inupiat people have told stories of spirits that roam the dark tundra when the sun is gone. Some call them shadow walkers. Others whisper of pale figures that blend with the snow. Outsiders laugh, of course, until they spend a winter here themselves. That's when the laughter dies. The teacher's journal. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a woman named Linda Graham, a schoolteacher who moved to Utqiagvik from Anchorage in the late 1980s. At first, she was fascinated by the polar night. She wrote in her journal about how the stars seemed sharper here, how the aurora danced like fire across the sky, and how the silence felt sacred. But within 3 weeks, her tone changed. December 7th, the children are restless. They yawn constantly in class, and some have begun falling asleep at their desks. One boy told me he hasn't seen his parents in days. When I asked why, he said they don't leave their room anymore. December 12th, I could have sworn I heard laughter outside my window last night. When I looked, there was nothing, only the black snowdrift against the glass. But I could feel it. Someone was standing there, watching. By mid-December, half her students had stopped coming to school. When Linda visited their homes, she found the doors wide open, snow blowing inside, meals half-eaten on the tables. No one was there. No footprints marked the fresh snow outside. It was as though the families had dissolved into the night. Her final entry was written on December 21st, the longest night of the year. They've started calling my name. I hear it in the dark between the gusts of wind. Sometimes it's the voice of my mother, who's been dead 10 years. Sometimes it's the children. I don't dare open the door, but I think they're already inside. She was never seen again. Her cabin was found in January, its interior untouched, her journal resting on the desk. No sign of struggle, no footprints, only darkness. The town's secret. Longtime residents of Utqiagvik rarely speak of the missing. They simply close their shutters and wait for the sun to return. Outsiders who press too hard are met with silence, or worse, with warnings. Don't go walking at night. Don't follow the voices. There are whispers that each winter, the town sacrifices some of its own, not by choice, but because the darkness demands it. One elder explained it in hushed tones. You think the night is empty, but it is not. It is alive. It feeds on us. Every year, it takes who it wants. If you're lucky, it ignores you. If not, he refused to finish the sentence. The outsider's experience. In 2009, a travel blogger named David Marks attempted to document the polar night. For his website, he posted photos of the frozen tundra, the eerie glow of streetlights, and the strange beauty of the northern lights. His last post read, "There's something moving in the snow outside my hotel. Not a person, not an animal. It's too tall, too thin. Every time I look, it stops. Every time I blink, it's closer. If I disappear, don't come looking." He vanished the next day. Police claimed he wandered into the tundra and froze to death, but his body was never recovered. His camera was found buried in the snow a mile from town. The last photo was completely black, except for two faint, glowing eyes. The endless night. Psychologists attribute the madness of Reykjavik to seasonal affective disorder, cabin fever, and sleep deprivation. They claim the human mind simply isn't built for 2 months without sunlight. But locals know better. They know that when the sun sets in November, it doesn't just leave the sky. It leaves the earth vulnerable. They know that something ancient moves in that darkness. Children draw it in school. Tall, shadowy figures with long fingers and no faces. Parents hush them, telling them not to feed the stories. But every family knows the rules. Never go out alone. Never answer when you hear your name. And above all, never look too long into the black, because if you do, the black will look back. When the sun finally rises again in late January, the entire town gathers to watch. They cheer, they cry, they cling to one another in relief. But among the crowd, there are always empty places, people who didn't make it through the long night. Their names are never spoken again. The darkness has claimed them, and it always will. Alaska is vast. So vast that it swallows whole states inside its borders. But within that wilderness, there lies a place with a reputation darker than the long polar night. An area stretching between Anchorage, Juneau, and Reykjavik, forming a region locals quietly call the Alaska Triangle. More than 16,000 people have gone missing here. Pilots, hikers, entire families. They vanish without wreckage, without footprints, without explanation. Search and rescue teams comb the land, only to find nothing. No torn backpacks, no clothing, no bodies. It's as if the wilderness itself breathes, opens its mouth, and swallows them whole. The pilot who never landed. In 1972, a small plane carrying U.S. Congressman Hale Boggs and 3 others disappeared while flying from Anchorage to Juneau. Despite one of the largest search efforts in American history, involving over 40 military aircraft and thousands of volunteers, no wreckage was ever found. The plane simply ceased to exist. Pilots who've flown over the triangle describe eerie experiences. Compasses spinning wildly, instruments failing, radios filling with whispers instead of static. Some say the land below seems to shift, rivers twisting into new paths, mountains rearranging themselves like a living maze. The lucky ones turn back in time. The unlucky? Their names are added to the growing list of the disappeared. The hiker's story. In 1999, a young backpacker named Caleb Foster set out to hike near Lake Iliamna, deep in the triangle's heart. He was well prepared. Maps, supplies, a GPS tracker. For 3 days, his satellite phone sent back normal check-ins. On the 4th, he called his girlfriend in the middle of the night, whispering, "I can't get out. The trees, they moved. I swear the trail was behind me. Now it's gone." The call ended abruptly. Search teams scoured the area for weeks. They found his camp, his tent still zipped, his belongings neatly arranged. But no sign of Caleb himself. Strangely, his GPS tracker was recovered 2 miles away, sitting on a tree stump, still powered on. The log showed that in his final hours, he had been walking in circles, deeper and deeper into the forest, until the signal stopped entirely. Local rangers shrugged and called it disorientation, but those who listened to the recording of his final phone call noticed something odd in the background. Between Caleb's words, faint but undeniable, was another voice. A low, rasping whisper that repeated his name. The missing village. The Alaska Triangle's strangest tale comes from 1930, when an entire Inuit village reportedly vanished without a trace. A trader passing through found the settlement eerily silent. Homes were abandoned, meals left uneaten, Sled dogs starved to death, still tied to posts. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, only absence. When the Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigated, they found the graves in the village cemetery had been emptied. Everybody was gone. Witnesses claimed to see strange lights in the sky over the tundra in the weeks before. The official report offered no explanation. To this day, the story is retold in hushed tones, though some historians dismiss it as folklore. But many in Alaska believe the triangle is not just a place, it's a living force, one that hungers for souls. The trap of the land. Scientists suggest logical explanations: severe weather, magnetic anomalies, rugged terrain. But even they admit the numbers don't add up. So many vanishings, so little evidence. Indigenous legends tell of the Tornit, ancient shadow people who stalk humans in the wilderness. They move unseen, herd travelers into the wild, and lead them away from safety. Others speak of portals, doorways in the land itself, where one wrong step can send you slipping into another world. Hikers describe the triangle as a labyrinth where the land refuses to stay still. Trails vanish, rivers shift, familiar landmarks appear in impossible places. Some say they've walked for hours, only to return to the same tree again and again, as if the wilderness is playing with them. The tourist who survived. One of the few who made it back alive was a tourist named Maria Lopez in 2014. She had been hiking with her brother when they became separated. She wandered for 2 days before stumbling back into town, frostbitten and delirious. She told rescuers that she had been followed. At first, she thought it was her brother, but when she called his name, the figure didn't answer. It only stood among the trees, tall and thin, watching. At night, she heard it circling her camp, breathing heavily. On the second night, it whispered to her in a voice that was both familiar and wrong. When rescuers went back to search for her brother, they found his backpack, his boots, and his jacket, all folded neatly on a rock beside the trail. His body has never been recovered. Maria refuses to speak about what she saw in the triangle, but she never returned to Alaska, the land that devours. Whether you believe in spirits, portals, or simply bad luck, the Alaska Triangle's reputation is undeniable. More than twice as many people go missing here each year compared to the rest of the United States. The land is vast, yes, but the silence surrounding these disappearances is unsettling. Alaskans don't laugh at the stories. They respect the triangle like one respects a dangerous predator. You don't mock it, you don't tempt it, and above all, you don't go alone. Because in the Alaska Triangle, the land itself may be alive, and once it decides to take you, no one will ever find you again. Alaska is not just cold, it is a graveyard made of ice. In many remote villages, winter freezes the ground so hard that digging a grave becomes impossible. The permafrost locks the earth like concrete. The dead cannot be buried, and so the bodies wait. Families store them in sheds, outbuildings, even makeshift ice houses, until the spring thaw. To outsiders, this sounds practical, almost logical. But to those who live there, it carries a darker truth, because in the long, dark months of winter, the dead do not always stay still. The village of waiting. One such place is a small fishing settlement near the Kobuk River. In December, the cemetery is sealed shut by frozen ground. That year, 3 villagers died: an old woman, a hunter, and a child who succumbed to illness. Their bodies were wrapped and placed in the storage shed by the edge of town, to be buried when the earth softened. At first, nothing seemed strange. The shed was locked tight, but one evening, a young boy passing by swore he heard knocking from inside. Not the groan of wood, not the cracking of ice, but deliberate, human knocks. 3, then silence. The adults told him it was the wind, but the next day, fresh snow revealed something else. Faint footprints leading away from the shed. Bare footprints. They trailed off into the tundra, vanishing in the storm. When the villagers checked inside, all 3 bodies were still there. And yet, their positions had changed. The child's head, once resting on folded hands, was turned toward the door. The hunter's arm, once straight, now bent as if reaching. No one wanted to move them again. The hunter's tale. Years later, an old trapper named Samuel told a story that chilled even the hardiest men in town. He claimed that during one particularly brutal winter, he had stored the body of his dead brother in the shed. At night, Samuel would sit by the fire and hear footsteps crunching in the snow outside his cabin. Always slow, always deliberate. When he opened the door, no one was there. On the third night, he bolted his windows and lay awake, rifle in hand. Just past midnight, he heard scratching at the wood. Not claws, fingernails. Long, slow drags along the cabin wall. Then came a whisper. Sam. The voice was his brother's. He swore he never opened that door, not even when the voice begged, pleaded, and finally screamed. By morning, the sound was gone. But when spring came and the villagers opened the shed, his brother's body was found not where it had been placed. It was at the door, face pressed against the crack, mouth frozen wide in a silent scream. Samuel left the village that year and never returned. The frozen child. In 2011, a nurse stationed in a small Alaskan community wrote anonymously about her experience. A toddler had died suddenly from respiratory illness in the heart of winter. The grieving parents, unable to bury their child, placed the body in the communal shed. The nurse admitted she couldn't sleep that night. Around 2 a.m., she swore she heard crying outside her clinic. It was faint, high-pitched, like the wail of an infant. She followed the sound to the shed, but when she unlocked the door, the crying stopped. Inside, the child's body lay perfectly still, except its eyes were open. She resigned at the end of the season, never to return. The science. Skeptics argue these are the tricks of isolation, darkness, and grief. Long winters twist the mind, they say. The sound of ice shifting in the walls can mimic knocks. Wind through the cracks can sound like whispers, and the brain, desperate for light, hallucinates. But the villagers do not believe it. They know what they've seen. They believe that the months between death and burial are dangerous, that when the soul has no grave to rest in, it wanders, caught between worlds. The body, left exposed to the cold, becomes a vessel for something else, something that does not belong among the living, the shed that breathes. Even now, visitors who come to these villages describe the same thing, an unease near the storage sheds. Some swear they hear breathing inside, as if dozens of lungs were drawing shallow, icy gasps in unison. Others claim they've seen pale hands against the frosted windows, though the sheds are kept locked. A documentary crew once tried to film inside one. Their footage was never released, but one of the cameramen later confessed he quit the industry altogether after what he witnessed. When asked to describe it, he refused. His only words were, "They were moving, all of them, and they were smiling." The curse of the unburied. To this day, many Alaskan elders repeat the same warning. Never disturb the dead in winter. Never walk near the sheds at night, because if you listen closely in the dark, when the wind dies and the world holds its breath, you may hear them, the restless ones, the ones waiting for the thaw. And if you hear them, they may hear you too. The storm had not relented. Snow swirled violently around the camp, the wind howling like a chorus of tortured souls. The research station's walls creaked under the pressure, and every few seconds the generator stuttered as though it might die for good. Inside, the group huddled together, their breaths visible in the freezing air. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared to. The silence was finally broken by Elena, her voice trembling. We need to do something. If we stay here, it will find us. Whatever it is, it knows we're trapped." Dr. Harris shook his head slowly. "It's not just the cold. Something's using it. Something alive. Or worse." His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking not from the temperature, but from dread. Through the frosted window, Marcus swore he saw movement. A tall, shadowy outline moving unnaturally against the storm, pausing just long enough to look back at the cabin. His throat went dry. "It's watching us." The others turned toward the glass, but the figure had already vanished into the blizzard. Suddenly, A deafening bang rattled the metal door. Everyone jumped. Another slam followed, harder this time, the steel frame groaning. Something was outside, trying to get in. "Hold it shut," Marcus yelled, rushing forward with Harris. Their shoulders slammed against the door, the force from the other side nearly hurling them backwards. Claws, or perhaps frozen fingers, scrape along the metal, the shrill sound cutting deep into their ears. Then, silence. They didn't dare move. For minutes, nothing but the storm. And then, faintly, a whisper carried by the wind. It wasn't in any language they knew, but it was unmistakably human. Dozens of voices, layered and broken, chanting through the blizzard. Elena pressed her hands over her ears. "Make it stop," she whimpered. The temperature plummeted further, the inside of the cabin frosting over. Frostbite began burning their skin even though they were indoors. Their breath slowed, and a creeping heaviness pressed down on their chests. The killer cold wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside with them. Marcus collapsed first, gasping, his lips turning blue. Harris tried to drag him up, but his own legs buckled. The air itself felt like shards of ice slicing through their lungs. The lights flickered, once, twice, before plunging them into darkness. And in that darkness, a face appeared in the window, pale, hollow-eyed, grinning wide with teeth that looked like jagged ice. It lingered just long enough for them to see it wasn't a reflection. Then came the final sound, the unmistakable hiss of the door unlocking from the inside. The helicopter descended over the northern Alaskan tundra, its blades slicing through the bitter wind. Below, the frozen landscape stretched endlessly, pale and barren. Yet scattered across this white wasteland were remnants of human habitation. Empty cabins, rusted snowmobiles, and skeletal remains of entire settlements, long abandoned and swallowed by the snow. The team of researchers had been warned. These settlements were off-limits to outsiders. Local guides muttered darkly about the cold that watches and ghosts that still live among the ruins. But curiosity had driven them here, and now they were standing in the middle of a place where no living person should tread. The first cabin they entered was small, barely standing against the wind. Its door hung crookedly on rusted hinges. Inside, dust coated everything, and frost clung to the furniture like white cobwebs. On a table, a journal lay open, pages yellowed and brittle. The writing was frantic. November 12th. The cold comes closer each night. The children speak to shadows. I cannot move without seeing them. Tonight, I hear them in the walls. They whisper my name. They know my thoughts. One of the team members, Dr. Hill, shivered despite his parka. This place, it's like the people left in a hurry, or never left at all. A sudden sound made them freeze. A creaking floorboard from the loft above. They told themselves it was the wind. But then the sound repeated, deliberate, slow, like footsteps, signs of the vanished. As they moved from cabin to cabin, the pattern became horrifyingly clear. Every settlement had the same eerie characteristics. Meals left half-eaten on tables, personal belongings scattered as though abandoned mid-action, and doors standing wide open despite the bitter cold. Outside, footprints led away from the cabins, then vanished into the snow. In some cases, multiple sets of tracks converged at one cabin, and then none continued. No snow was disturbed beyond a certain point. It was as though the people simply ceased to exist. And the deeper they went, the stronger the sensation became. A presence, cold, watching, waiting. The ice shadows. By the third cabin, night had fallen. The aurora flickered overhead, painting the ice in ghostly green and violet hues. But the beauty of the lights did nothing to soothe them. Shadows moved across the snow, seemingly independent of the wind. Tall, thin shapes that twisted unnaturally. One of the researchers, Lena, whispered, They're watching us." Then they saw movement in the corner of the settlement. A figure crouched low, white as the snow, with hollow eyes reflecting the aurora. It didn't walk, it glided, sliding silently across the ice. When it noticed the team, it froze. A chill unlike anything they had felt before swept through them. gnawing at their bones. The team tried to take a photo, but the camera malfunctioned. The figure was gone in the viewfinder, though Lena swore she saw it blink. The abandoned church. The largest building in the settlement was a small wooden church, its steeple broken and leaning. Inside, the air was stagnant, smelling faintly of decay. Pews were upturned, and the altar was covered in frost. Symbols, crudely carved, lined the walls, shapes that seemed to twist and move if stared at too long. From the loft, the faintest whisper floated down, a child's voice, singing a lullaby in a language none of them understood. No one moved. The voice grew louder, echoing off the walls, reverberating in their skulls. Then it stopped abruptly. Silence. Only the wind outside. The warning. They were about to leave when they found it. A single cabin, untouched by snow, as if preserved by some unnatural force. Inside, a figure crouched in the corner. A man or woman, frozen mid-motion, eyes wide in terror. Around them, a small carved sign read simply, "Leave." The settlements remember. As they turned to leave, the shadows outside seemed to converge, blocking the path back to the helicopter. The wind carried whispers, dozens of voices overlapping, chanting the same warning. Do not stay. Do not touch. Leave. The team ran, sprinting across the ice, the aurora above now twisted into jagged, unnatural shapes. And behind them, the settlements waited, silent once more. Somewhere in the vast frozen expanse of Alaska, the abandoned settlements continued to watch, waiting, hungry, and patient. The night in Alaska was absolute. Darkness draped over the tundra like a heavy shroud, and the wind whispered threats through the skeletal trees. The research team, exhausted from days of navigating abandoned settlements, had made camp near the edge of a frozen river. Their tents were anchored deep into the ice, but the howling wind cut through every layer of insulation, chilling them to the bone. Then came the first howl. It was low at first, almost human, yet distorted, carrying a resonance that seemed impossible for any natural creature. The sound echoed across the frozen plains, bouncing from distant hills and frozen cliffs. It wasn't a wolf or a coyote. It was something else. Dr. Mason froze, straining to listen. Did you hear that? He whispered. The others nodded, eyes wide. The howl came again, this time closer, then further, surrounding the camp. Unnatural hunting. The team's radios, previously unreliable in the storm, began picking up strange static between channels. Amid the white noise, faint whispers emerged, fragmented, indecipherable, but unmistakably voices. Multiple voices, chanting, laughing, screaming. It was as if the night itself was alive, mocking them, hurting them, guiding them towards some unseen trap. Marcus grabbed a flare, igniting it and waving it into the darkness. Shadows danced and twisted on the snow, forming tall, thin figures that retreated when illuminated, only to return the moment the light faded. Each howl now seemed to come from several directions at once, moving with deliberate, intelligent precision. One of the younger researchers, Elena, muttered in terror. There, watching. They know where we are. They're circling. The first attack. By midnight, the howls had intensified. Snow was whipped into blinding flurries, making visibility almost zero. Then came a scream from the edge of the camp. A researcher had been pulled from their tent, vanishing into the night. The team rushed with ropes and ice axes, but when they reached the spot, only a tangle of snow and blood remained. No footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing except the echoing howls that now seemed almost triumphant. Dr. Mason realized the terrifying truth. This was not merely an animal hunting them. The cold, the darkness, the wind, they were all tools. Predators that could shape the landscape, use the snow and shadows as weapons, herd humans into death. Voices in the wind. Hours later, the remaining researchers huddled together, listening. The howls became words. The wind whispered names, one by one, clearly pronouncing each person's identity. Marcus clutched his notebook, writing frantically. They know us. They are not wild. They are intelligent. From beyond the ridge came a series of high-pitched screeches, almost like laughter. The shadows of the trees moved unnaturally, stretching toward the camp as if alive. A pale figure appeared at the edge of the light, its eyes glowing faintly green, elongated arms reaching for them. Elena shouted, but her voice was swallowed by the gale. Every attempt to communicate with the outside world failed. The radios emitted nothing but static and faint, mocking imitations of their own voices. Descent into madness. By 4 a.m., exhaustion and fear began to take their toll. Some researchers were murmuring to themselves, seeing shapes that weren't there, imagining hands on their shoulders. The howls grew closer, sharper, perfectly synchronized. It was as if the creatures, or spirits, knew their weaknesses, attacking mind and body simultaneously. Then the most horrifying sound, a chorus of voices, combining the howls with human speech, screaming the researchers' fears back at them. Marcus whispered in horror, "They're feeding off our terror." And the team realized the unthinkable. Survival depended not only on physical endurance, but on resisting the psychological grip of the night. But the killer cold, the howls, the shadows, they were relentless. When dawn finally came, a few tents remained. Some researchers were gone, their footprints vanishing in the drifting snow. The remaining team members knew one thing: whatever had hunted them in the night had claimed its prey, and it was still out there, waiting for the next soul to wander into its domain. The mine entrance yawned like a black wound in the mountain, ice-crusted and ominous. Local legends called it cursed, haunted by the miners who had vanished decades ago. But desperate for data, the team had ignored the warnings. They needed answers. Jack lit his torch, the flame trembling in the frigid wind. The others followed, boots crunching on frozen gravel. Every step echoed through the hollow shafts, carrying an unnatural resonance, as if the mine itself were listening. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply. Frost coated the walls, forming grotesque shapes that looked like twisted faces screaming silently. A smell of damp earth mixed with something metallic, blood, rust, decay. The first shaft was narrow and unstable. Wooden supports groaned under the weight of snow and ice, threatening collapse. In the faint torchlight, old mining carts sat derelict, tracks frozen mid-turn. Elena stepped forward, pointing to scratches on the walls. Hundreds of them, some human-sized, some far too long to belong to any ordinary miner. Marks like claws scraping the timber and stone. "These aren't accidents. They were warnings," she whispered. Then a low rumble shook the floor, echoing through the tunnels. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the sound of dripping water became distorted, like distant screams. The miners' ghosts. As they delved deeper, the shadows seemed to take on life. Faint figures appeared in the torchlight, miners frozen in eternal work, their faces twisted in terror, pickaxes suspended mid-swing. Some turned slowly to watch the intruders, eyes hollow, mouths open in silent screams. Jack tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. The apparitions didn't move like normal people. They drifted, sliding through walls and floors, glancing at the team with empty eyes. This isn't a mine," Marcus muttered. "It's a tomb, a trap." The air grew colder with each step. Their breaths fogged into thick clouds, freezing midair. Frost formed on their clothing and hair, creeping toward exposed skin. The haunted mines were alive. The tunnel that screamed. The team entered a long, narrow tunnel. Their torches flickered as a gust of wind blasted from deep within, carrying the unmistakable sound of screaming. Not one scream, but hundreds, layered, overlapping, echoing against the frozen walls. Then the ground beneath them cracked. Ice splintered, and shadowy hands reached up from the floor, gripping ankles and legs. Panic set in. Marcus tried to pull free, but the hands were icy, merciless. The screams intensified. They weren't screams of pain. They were screams of hunger, of rage, of souls trapped for eternity. The collapse. Suddenly, the tunnel shuddered violently. Timber supports snapped, sending a cascade of ice and rock crashing down. The team scattered. One of the researchers, Amelia, disappeared in the chaos, dragged into darkness by unseen forces. Jack and Elena ran blindly, following the rail tracks to the surface. Behind them, the mine seemed to breathe, an exhale of cold so bitter it burned lungs and skin alike. When they emerged, the wind was silent. Snow drifted around the entrance, as if the mine itself had swallowed its secrets once more. There was no sign of Amelia, no tracks, no evidence she had ever existed. The warning. Jack sank to his knees in the snow, staring at the gaping black hole of the mine. A faint whisper rode the wind, carrying through the frozen landscape. Enter, if you dare, and join the others. From that day on, the haunted mines were avoided by everyone, a place where the cold, the shadows, and the spirits of the long-dead miners merged into a single predator. The team survived, but the memory of the mines and what they had heard and seen would haunt them forever. The snowstorm had eased, but the landscape remained unforgiving. The team trudged through knee-deep snow toward a series of villages marked on old maps, though most locals claimed they were abandoned decades ago. They were isolated, hidden deep in the Alaskan wilderness, and cut off from the outside world. From the air, the villages looked quaint, tiny clusters of wooden houses surrounded by frost-coated trees. But on the ground, the charm vanished. The wind carried whispers, faint and distorted, like voices carried across miles of ice. The first village was eerily silent. Smoke still curled from a broken chimney, yet no one answered their knocks. Windows were boarded with rotting planks, and the doors hung ajar. Inside one house, a table was set with frozen food. A tea kettle tipped over as if the occupants had vanished mid-meal. Dr. Mason picked up a photograph lying on the floor. The faces were smiling, frozen in time, but their eyes seemed off, dark, hollow, almost accusatory. "It's like they never left," he murmured. Then came the sound, footsteps crunching on snow outside, slow, deliberate, surrounding the house, shadows in the trees. The team hurried to the next village, hoping the others were safe. The trees around them were silent at first, but soon shadows emerged between the trunks, tall, thin, moving against the wind. They didn't walk normally. They slithered across the snow, keeping pace with the team without making a sound. Elena whispered, "They're not animals. They're something else." As night fell, the shadows became more aggressive. Doors slammed in empty houses, windows shattered inward, and the wind carried dozens of faint voices chanting in unison. Names were called, every member of the team. The hidden cemetery. In the center of the largest village lay a small cemetery, half buried in snow. Tombstones were old, cracked, some toppled, but many graves were empty or contained only hollow shapes of frozen bodies. Jack's flashlight fell on one grave in particular. A freshly disturbed mound of snow revealed footprints leading toward the forest, bare, human-like, yet impossibly long and thin. They vanished into the trees, leaving only the echoes of whispers in their wake. They walk at night, Marcus said, voice trembling. The villagers, maybe they never left. The night of the howls. As the night deepened, the isolated villages came alive. Windows rattled violently. Doors banged open and closed, and the wind carried the unmistakable sound of screaming. From all directions, howls rose, low and guttural at first, then piercingly high, like a chorus of tortured souls. The team huddled together in a single house, terrified to move. The shadows crept closer, flickering just beyond the windows, their eyes glowing faint green in the darkness. Outside, the snow itself seemed to writhe, shifting and forming shapes that resembled the villagers, distorted and elongated. The whispers became words. They spoke directly to the team. "Leave. Stay. Join us." No one dared answer. They only shivered, frozen in more ways than one. The cold wasn't just physical anymore. It was alive, watching, judging. The morning after, when dawn finally arrived, the villages were silent once more. Snow drifted over the paths, erasing footprints. The shadows had vanished. The team survived, but only barely. They left the isolated villages behind, forever haunted by the knowledge that somewhere, deep in the Alaskan wilderness, people, or something pretending to be people, still waited, waiting for the next lost travelers to wander into their snowbound domain. The Arctic Ocean stretched endlessly before them, a frozen expanse that reflected the gray, storm-heavy sky. The team had finally reached the northern coast after days of trekking through ice fields and abandoned villages. But the sea was not calm. It moved like a living thing, a silent predator under the ice. Rocks jutted jaggedly from the surf, coated in slick layers of frost, and the wind carried the faint scent of something rotting, fish, or perhaps something far larger. Every wave seemed to growl a low, hungry rumble that vibrated through the frozen ground. The first disappearance. They set up a small camp near the edge of a cliff overlooking the frozen water. That night, a strange sound cut through the howling wind, a wet, dragging noise, like something massive scraping across ice. Marcus shone his flashlight toward the sound. At first, he saw nothing. Then, through the haze, he spotted movement beneath the ice, shapes twisting and writhing like dark shadows trapped under the frozen surface. "It's alive," he whispered. "The sea. It's alive." Later, as the team slept, a scream pierced the night. One of the researchers, Elena, had been pulled from her sleeping bag. By morning, only her scarf remained, frozen stiff, dangling over the cliff's edge. No footprints led away. The sea had taken her. The ocean awakens. The next day, the tide rose unnaturally, crushing ice floes and exposing jagged rocks that hadn't been visible before. From beneath the water, something massive moved, so large that the ripples shook the ice around the camp. Jack aimed his binoculars, but could barely make out the silhouette of what appeared to be a creature hundreds of feet long, its body darker than the abyss itself. Tentacles, or perhaps jagged fins, breached the surface intermittently, scraping the cliffside with a sound like metal on metal. The team realized the stories were true. The locals called it the sea that eats, a predator born from the depths, feeding on those who dare to wander near its frozen domain. The hunt. As night fell, the sound returned, a wet, grinding roar that echoed across the ice. The team tried to retreat, but the ice underfoot began to crack and shift violently. Shapes moved beneath the surface, dragging chunks of ice and snow into swirling currents. "It's hurting us," Marcus shouted, panic overtaking him. One by one, the remaining team members were attacked. The ice gave way beneath their feet, and the water claimed them in seconds. The creature was relentless, intelligent. It didn't just kill, it toyed, circling, forcing its prey into impossible situations. The last survivor, Jack, managed to scramble to higher ground, clinging to jagged rocks as the frozen waves rose like walls around him. The wind carried the faint, distorted cries of his friends, each one swallowed by the sea in ways that made no sense. Bodies missing, nothing left but snow and ice. Through the darkness, Jack could see the creature fully. It was a black mass, tentacled, eyes glowing faintly green like those of the frozen villagers he had seen in the interior. It wasn't just a sea monster, it was the embodiment of the Arctic itself, cold, endless, and hungry. "You cannot escape," a voice whispered through the wind, though no one was there. Jack screamed, but the sound was carried away, swallowed by the sea that eats. He realized the terrifying truth. In Alaska, some things are not meant to be studied, not meant to be survived. The storm rose again, snow blinding, wind roaring, and the Arctic claimed its final victim. The sea that eats had finished its hunt for now. The storm had passed, but the Arctic night was endless, an unbroken black that swallowed everything. Jack, the last survivor, stumbled through the snow-covered ruins of what had once been a research station. His flashlight flickered and buzzed, the battery near death. The world around him was silent, too silent. Above, the northern lights danced, green and violet ribbons across the sky. But their beauty was a cruel trick. The light flickered erratically, dimming and vanishing as if something unseen was swallowing it. Every time the aurora faded, Jack felt the darkness press closer, heavier, almost alive. Echoes of the lost. Jack called out, his voice cracking. Elena? Marcus? Anyone? The only response was the wind, whispering through the broken windows and icy walls, carrying fragments of voices he recognized. The screams, the cries, the laughter of the team members lost to the cold, to the shadows, to the sea. As he moved, the snow around him began to shift. Shadows twisted unnaturally, rising like smoke. Shapes emerged, human, yet distorted, faces frozen in silent screams, eyes glowing faint green. The same haunting gaze he had seen in the villages, the mines, and under the ice of the sea. The disappearing light wasn't just the aurora. It was something darker, something that consumed everything luminous in the Arctic. The sun, the moon, even hope itself. The frozen echo. Jack entered a ruined cabin, the last remnant of the station. The walls were covered in frost, symbols etched deep into the wood. The temperature plummeted, his breath crystallizing in midair. And then he saw it. A figure crouched in the corner, taller than any human, its face hidden beneath a hood of frozen shadows. "You shouldn't have come," it hissed, voice layered with dozens of whispers, all speaking at once. Jack tried to run, but the light from his flashlight vanished, plunging him into pitch-black darkness. In the void, he felt something brush against his shoulder, icy fingers grazing his neck. The shadows whispered his name, chanting in a rhythm that made his blood freeze. The final descent. The aurora flickered back, but the light was weak, distorted, a mere mockery of the sun. Jack stumbled outside, hoping to reach the edge of the cliffs above the sea. He looked back at the station, and the shadows were everywhere now, stretching across the snow, crawling over the ruins, twisting and writhing like a living tide. The whispers became voices, calling not just names, but memories, regrets, fears. The light disappeared again. Jack was alone, swallowed by blackness and silence, with only the Arctic cold pressing in from all sides. A low, guttural roar echoed across the ice. It was neither human nor animal. It was the Arctic itself, sentient and patient, claiming what it had been waiting for all along. Jack tried to scream, but no sound emerged. His flashlight fell from his trembling hands, and the last trace of light vanished. Eternal darkness. In the end, there was nothing but the cold. The shadows enveloped him, the whispers consuming him, and the disappearing light faded completely. The Arctic had claimed its final witness. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the abandoned settlements, the haunted mines, the isolated villages, and the sea that eats waited. The cold never sleeps. The darkness never ends. And in Alaska, some lights are never meant to return. The world was silent, too silent. Thank you for surviving the frozen nightmare with us. If you dare, the Arctic never forgets, and neither should you. If these haunted settlements, the killer cold, and the sea that eats left you shivering, make sure to like, comment your scariest moment, and subscribe for more terrifying true-to-life horror adventures. Every shadow has a story, every howl has a secret, and your next nightmare could be just a click away. Subscribe now to join our journey into the most chilling, real-life horrors from around the world and never face them alone.